So, Professor Kurihara, very nice to meet you. Thanks for coming to our conference. And my first question would be just your first experience of St. Petersburg, your first impression on it. Did you like it?
Yes, I like this city as a whole. Although I arrived here last night. But this morning I woke up at 3 o'clock because of time differences between Japan and Russia. And I couldn't stand staying at the hotel. I went outside to walk around in the city. I spent 2 hours for walking.
That's great. Is it your first visit to Russia?
Yes.
So it will be your first impression. That's very, very nice to sit here. My first question about philosophy will be on your particular sphere of interests, where it lies, and how long do you study ancient philosophy? Do you study only ancient philosophy or something else? And what are you going to do your report the day after tomorrow about? Briefly, of course.
I'm majoring in ancient philosophy, especially Plato. I've been studying Plato for more than 30 years. So I like Plato. I love Plato. Especially, for these years, I've been studying Plato's Republic. For example, epistemology, metaphysics, political theory, and ethics. I published a book titled Plato on Private and Public. So I'm concentrate on this kind of topic.
And your report on this conference, would it be concentrated on? Or?
Unfortunately, I don't read a paper this time because I read a paper 2 weeks ago in Beijing. For me, it is very tough to read different papers in the same summer. So I just avoid.
You'll be attending the conference.
No, not.
I see. So what do you think, because, you know, as ancient, the scholars who study antiquity, ancient philosophy, we're always asked what is the value and use of what we're doing, why we're studying such an old stuff, and what is the use for the modern society of those studies. What do you think on that? What do you think, how can we apply it?
That's a very important question. But I want to say that Plato's theory of the form of good is very important for all of us, because he tries to criticize our common sense, common opinions, which force us to ask such a question, right? Is it useful to study antiquity or? So what do you mean by usefulness?
Just, you know, probably that the idea that today humanities are going through a crisis because people pay more and more attention, especially government and universities, they pay attention to more practical studies. Yeah. So just many of young people are thinking on what would be the need for them to study philosophy, especially ancient philosophy, which is so far. So what do you think we can tell them if they ask us such a question? Because, well, we're scholars, we should answer something.
So we need some distance, okay, between us and antiquity. If we look at something at hand, it's easy to understand this, we may think, right? But if we look at something farther, it's hard to understand. We have to use our imagination to understand it more clearly. Right? So Plato lived 2,400 years ago. To understand him, we need to, first of all, learn Greek, ancient Greek, right? And read his text very carefully. It's tough, very tough. Right? By doing this, right? By doing so, we need to train ourselves. We don't rely on our common sense, common opinion, right? Which we naturally have, which we rely on But now we need training by which we can read into Plato's text. Then we may change ourselves by using our imagination. That's what I think is very important for us.
Do many scholars in your country, in the city where you are teaching, pay attention to antiquity, other big academic society, or not?
Yes, in Japan, yeah, as one of the modern countries, we are inclined to focus on something practical, as you emphasize. So-called useless stuff is neglected very much. But this is a kind of superficial observation. Many people are eager to learn more and more important stuff, including antiquity. Japan is so-called a culture of translation. So we 1,500 years ago, we imported many important stuff from China, India, sometimes via Korea, right? And we tried to modify them. Right? And 150 years ago, we imported modernization from the West, Europe, America, right? And we tried to modify them. And we tried to mix these important stuffs into our original thoughts, if any. So this kind of trial constitutes our nature, our identity. So Japanese people like to change ourselves by reading something further, as I said. But sometimes we can't see many, just really focus on narrow.
Dive into that.
Yeah.
I see. Oh, that's interesting. I've never thought about that. If you would be a person who could influence somehow the sphere of education itself, the educational establishment, what would you change in that system? Probably just to make them pay more attention to ancient studies, or what would you change? Just what would be your contribution to it?
Yeah, two sides. Right? On one side, as I said, we need to learn ancient Greek, right? Which seems to be useless, but we can change ourselves by doing this, right? So I want students to learn ancient language, first of all, and read Greek text carefully. That's one side. On the other hand, my students have to connect their lives with ancient lives. So they need to know Plato. Plato tried to mix two different kinds. One positive thing, one negative thing, and try to mix and create a new thing. So by reading Plato, they can have some skill to change their lives harmoniously. That's what I want them to do.
Yeah, so as a scholar, you want them to focus more on the thorough investigation and then changing themselves. As probably a politician, as maybe a person who could influence the whole area, do you think that there is something that government should make for the scholars, or it's only our own deal and we should deal with it as we think so? Because, you know, Plato always wanted to create some kind of ideal philosophic state governed by philosophers. Do you think that we should try to achieve that goal, or it's just an ideal and we shouldn't even try?
That's very difficult. Very difficult question. Ideally, the government must not interrupt
interrupt,
our
yeah.
trial. So no interruption, no なんだ
Just scholars.
interference. So we need freedom. But in reality, it's hard. We need money, we need some support, financial support. Yeah. So just government gives us money and don't tell anything about what
and
we
give
have to do.
the freedom
Yeah.
for the scholars. So can you wish something to your Russian colleagues, to your colleagues from St. Petersburg, as the participants of the conference? Can you wish something to them?
Yeah, I was surprised to see the program. So many people, Russian people, gathered together to discuss Plato and the legacy of Plato. So I wish to discuss on Plato with your colleagues, Russian people, students, scholars. I expect to have exciting discussions among us.
I expect to have that too. Thank you very much for coming.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much for
It was
your
very nice.
hospitality.
Oh, thanks.